like, I was so desperate to be an actor when it first happened that I couldn't be good at it because I was so eager to be perfect and to be right and to be nailing it. And that actually, by falling into comedy and going that way round to acting, comedy is something that I'd never thought I'd do, and it doesn't really by its nature suit my personality because it requires failure. Like, it is an absolute mandatory element, a built-in surety that you will fail. You have to. If you're not bombing some of the time, then you're not trying any new material. Like, you're not building a show, you're not pushing yourself. I think if you were not dying some of the time, then you were coasting.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
My guest today is a lot of fun. She has empowering and insightful stories. I appreciate her openness and playful attitude. I left this chat feeling awesome, motivated, and light. Catherine has a great take on failure, which is just wonderful to hear, and a maturity that you often hear from people who've been doing this for twice as long. I was mesmerized. It's great. I loved it. You'll love it. So let's get into it and officially introduce Catherine to the podcast. Catherine Bohart is an award-winning comedian, writer, and actor. Her stand-up special, Immaculate, is available on Amazon Prime. Catherine also returns to Melbourne for the International Comedy Festival with a new solo show, Again with the Feelings. If you're in Melbourne, check it out now. Her broadcasting career is rapidly on the rise, with credits including Live at the Apollo, Mock the Week, A League of Their Own, House of Games, Pointless Celebrities, The Stand-Up Sketch Show, Roast Battles, Celebrity Mastermind, and also as a correspondent on The MASH Report. She recently filmed LOL, Last One Laughing Island for Amazon Prime. She's also a talented actor with credits including Mawaan Rizwan's BBC sitcom Juice and the sketch show Lazy Susan for BBC Three. She also hosts the podcast Trusty Hogs with fellow comedian Helen Bauer. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about the highs and lows of doing stand-up, wanting to get better, being an expert debater, her unique path to comedy, perfectionism, what are you willing to do philosophy, being cut from TV, her new shows, plus plenty more. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. I was originally going to start here, but I reckon we were talking about Melbourne weather and Melbourne compared to the UK. So I'd love to know, what are your thoughts about being in Melbourne at this time compared to where you were?
It's the ideal time of year to come here if you live in London, because we are still coming out of winter in London. But London weather has a real vicious streak to her. So what she'll do is she'll go, "It's spring." No, honestly, I promise it's spring. No, seriously, trust me, don't even worry about it. It's spring. And you'll be like, are you sure? And she's like, honestly, it's spring. So you're like, okay, wow, it's sunny. And yeah, you know what, it's March. I'm going to trust her. It's spring, guys. And then she goes into second winter immediately. She's so spiteful. And she continues on in that sort of gaslighting for several months. So come May, we might have some good weather. But right now, it's a thrill to be out of the vice-like grip of cruelty that is English weather, and a joy to be here. People keep saying to us, are we cold? Like, we'll be out in t-shirts and shorts, and people in Melbourne keep being like, are you not cold? We're like, this is the warmest I've been in years, frankly. Years, and it's delightful.
Okay,
I do not envy people that live in London. I think you live in London.
Hmm.
It sounds brutal. My future brother-in-law's there, and you don't see, the sunshine during the winter. We do have our 4 seasons here, but it's not like winter, then winter again.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. Also, lol, you think you have 4 seasons. I'm like, you have degrees of summer, my friend. Your life's fine. It's so nice. I can't even believe that it's this sunny and that there are orange leaves on the trees.
Yeah, they're quite
It's
beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I'm like, it's 27 degrees out. Do you guys do Fahrenheit?
We do the same as you, Celsius.
I just said Fahrenheit. That's it. How you know I'm jet lagged. I meant
Yeah,
Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit.
Wow. Well, I'm glad we're all on Celsius. It's probably best I keep it that way.
Yeah, I think we should all do that. And actually, we can go here. In Ireland, what's the weather like compared to England? Is it
Just
similar?
as bad, but wetter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you move from Ireland to, make, I think you left because you wanted to pursue acting. Did you get a bit of
Yes.
a shock? You're like, oh, I'm just used to this. I'm just more dry.
I will say, I actually think London summers are maybe even slightly hotter than in Ireland.
Ooh.
Obviously, the environment being ruined means that we're all going up a little few degrees. But I think in general, yeah, London's just a little bit drier. Not much, but a little bit. And but it has the same thing of having like the 4 seasons in one day repeated on a loop, which you guys have here. But well, I feel like the rain here isn't like the rain in Ireland. The rain in Ireland is like, would you like to question God's motive?
Uh,
Because you have to assume there's a dark force behind it. You're like, wow, no, somebody's vengeful today.
wow, that sounds brutal. I complain about Melbourne weather all the time. Is Australia your third home? Is Ireland second home, London first home? How does it?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think it's the city that I've stayed in. Oh, maybe Paris, but that's no one's home unless you're French, and even then they're mad at it. I think it's probably the city I've gigged in most outside of those, and stayed in longest outside of those. And also, sure, there's as many Irish people here as there are in Ireland, which makes it easier. And
There's a lot. Yeah.
and it doesn't feel as far away, weirdly. Maybe because it's English speaking as well. It
Yeah.
feels relatively similar culture wise. And also, goddamn it, I like it here. I know nobody actually lives in the CBD
Mm,
normally,
yeah. I don't know
but
anyone.
no, I mean, and why would you? That'd be like living in London City, like the city of London. It doesn't make any sense. But like no one goes to live in a financial institution. But I would say that it's just like it feels like a reasonable New York with like more affordable brunch.
That would be a great tourist attraction, a more affordable New York. Our tourist
Yeah,
attraction, big
yeah.
blurb, putting it everywhere. I quite like that.
The medium apple.
Yeah. I think you should work for Tourism Victoria. I think that'd be great
Yeah.
because we don't have a good slogan here. We
It's
just,
mad they haven't hired me.
I know, we'll put it out there to the universe. And I alluded to this before. You moved to England from Ireland to pursue acting. I'd love to know a
Yeah.
bit about that and the move.
So I always wanted to be an actor. No skills to indicate that should be the choice I made, but I'd seen the television and I liked the look of it. And I have, Irish parents who came from working class backgrounds, and they were like, how about being a teacher? And I went to a good school and I was a smart girl. So everyone was like, how about being a lawyer? And I was like, wicked. So I went and studied law for a year out of school, hated it, was drowning miserably,
Yeah.
dropped out. Then I went to study French and history so I could become that teacher. Halfway through, I was like, well, this is hell on earth. And so I started a theatre course at night. And that sort of, the outlet sort of got me through the degree.
Yep.
And then I had a really nice teacher at my theatre school who helped me prep for auditions for
Oh,
drama schools in London. And then I went to do my MA in acting for Screen and Central School of Speech and Drama. My best friend there was actually an Australian who had a
yes.
similar level of cynicism to me. And I was like, oh, there's no hope in that girl's eyes. I should probably hang out with her. We were not built for drama school, but we were there together and we got through it. And
Adorable.
yeah, I actually have a joke in my show, this show that I'm doing this year, which is about how I went from a mental hospital to drama school because I spent that summer before in a mental institution, and they were not different enough. That's what I'd say. Both full of people singing things they could easily say.
That is such a good bit. That's
Thank
hilarious.
you. I'm sorry to do jokes at you. What a horrible thing at 11 o'clock in the morning to have
No,
some
no,
comedian
no.
being like, do you like this?
We're going to get a notepad and pen and just tick off the ones we
Yeah.
like and don't like.
Yeah. You
That's
let
how
me know
I
your
work.
notes at the end.
Yeah. I'll be like, look, at the 16-minute mark, I really enjoyed this, but we could have
Yeah.
worked on the 7-minute mark. Okay, you said a lot of things. Maybe we'll go back here because I always find this very interesting. I studied to be an accountant. I was an accountant. I hate it. Now I'm doing this in screenwriting. So I feel like you know my pain. And it was a strong pain at the time. How did your parents feel? You said they come from working class backgrounds. When you said you were dropping out of to be a lawyer, what was that like?
I think they were fine with it as long as I was going to go back to university immediately with something else.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think it's really easy to be like, when you've been successful or when you've made creative stuff work, to be like, ha, what none of you understood was that I was going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
But I'm 35. It's taken this long to make it work. So, like, they weren't totally wrong. And
We'll agree to disagree.
And I mightn't have. Like, it's all very well and good that I did. But if I hadn't, do you know what I mean? That would be a stressful environment. And I do think that it's easy to be like they were never given those options to be creative, to do anything other than the 3 jobs that were available to them. I think it's reasonable for them to be like, you have so many choices. Would you not veer a tiny bit towards, I don't know, safety and security so that we might, having raised you and worried for about 19 years, maybe get a minute's sleep? So I try not to be too hard on them for that. But yeah,
That's
I think
nice.
they
Good
were just
perspective.
I think they were stressed out, mainly because I am a perfectionist. So I was the one stressing most. I was the one being like, what is my path in life and how do I immediately succeed at this?
That's me.
So, I wasn't like a nonchalant dreamer. I was like an incredibly intense, uptight perfectionist who felt herself to be creative, but was unclear how to do that by numbers, yes.
Very interesting. I want to bring back to the perfectionism because that's very interesting. You've gone on a journey throughout, going from acting. I don't know where to go. This is really exciting. Pursuing the acting dream. You mentioned that you're 35 years old now and that it's only like really happened now. What I find really interesting is that, I've done close to 250 podcasts. The vast majority of people have only, inverted commas, made it after 35. Very few people I know are like hugely successful and killing it at life in like their 20s and their 30s. And congratulations to the people that find it. It's such an interesting thing that we think like by our 30s, because I'm 31, and we have to have everything figured out. It would be nice. Trust me, I would love it. And I know that when you were pursuing acting, you were initially surprised that it wasn't immediate that you're an actor. And I find that very interesting because we all have that feeling. I'd love to know how you push through from that. Because you're thinking when you moved, actually, you're going, yeah.
I do think there's an element of, I grew up in the like very quiet, boring suburbs, and I'd never really known anybody who worked creatively. So there's a level of delusion that got me there. I was quite like a kid who like daydreamed a lot, and obviously was quite. I lived in a bubble. I was very like covered in cotton wool. Like I think when you live in the countryside, you are younger in your teens than maybe city kids. And so I was naive in lots of ways, and I am a relatively delusional woman. Like, just for context, I want to say, when I went to my first driving lesson, I was shocked I couldn't drive. Like, I really, truly felt like, I've seen people drive. Yeah. I've watched it loads of times.
Yeah.
I got in the seat and was like, okay, lady, watch this. And then it was like, wow, I don't know how to drive. So
Wild.
I think I have that attitude of like, well, I think I'll be fine. And then I'm often wrong. But yeah, I think I thought there had to be something I was missing, and that there must actually just be a queue I could get into. And then I'd get to the top of the queue, and then I would tell a nice lady that I was there to be an actor, and then that we work from there. Obviously that's not how the industry works at all, and I was completely lost and sort of floundering in London when I was first there. But I feel glad for that. I feel like the acting industry is so intensely brutal on young women. I think it's still very brutal. I think like the expectation for thinness, the expectation for perfection, the expectation for the sort of like that same thing of like we have to have made it by a certain age. The prized nature of youth in creative endeavors is so astonishing. When you're like, we're talking about storytelling, you have to have some actual stories, but we all prize like child prodigies, which is really interesting, I think, and shows maybe a little bit of self-hatred. But I think the ultimate outcome was that I was so desperate to be an actor when it first happened that I couldn't be good at it because I was so eager to be perfect and to be right and to be nailing it. And that actually, by falling into comedy and going that way round to acting, comedy is something that I'd never thought I'd do, and it doesn't really by its nature suit my personality because it requires failure. Like, it is an absolute mandatory element, a built-in surety that you will fail.
Yeah.
You have to. If you're not bombing some of the time, then you're not trying any new material. Like, you're not building a show, you're not pushing yourself. I think if you were not dying some of the time, then you were coasting.
Yep.
And also like you're playing only audiences that look and sound like you, and that's boring as hell. And so I think that comfortability in discomfort, listen, still not my happy place, but that slight practice, the practice of being bad at something, has really let me have more fun and laugh at myself more when I do act, and I think that means I'm more relaxed and better at it. And I heard my little email beep, so I'm gonna close it down.
I think that's so brilliant and wise of you. I'm not trying to just throw compliments because, you mentioned the car example where you just think that you're going to be able to drive, and then you do comedy, which is scary as fuck. You are getting, I know we'll talk about debating and how that's probably helped you, but you're getting up on something, you're getting up and you're probably like everyone else, not brilliant the first year or two potentially, but you want to get up and inverted commas fail and try new things. That is rare. A lot of people, especially because driving a car is, you see everyone can do it. Not everyone can do stand-up. So if you to actually want to pursue it and continue and you mentioned perfectionism, that you actually wanted to get better, that could scare 10,000 billion people away. So I wonder, what was it that made you keep on going? Because it sounds like it goes against all your beliefs of what you had before.
Well, I think it's interesting. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I did an open mic and was one of the best ones on the night,
nice.
Which was enough for me to be like, I'm good at this. Even though obviously when you zoom out, you realize every single new comedian is the worst comic they'll ever be.
Yeah.
And most of them, like 99.9% of them, are bad comics. And I was included in that, but I was the best of the bad, and that was enough of a confidence boost because it'd be a lie for me to be like I was bad at it and then really wanted to get better. No, I actually never do things that I'm bad at. I usually try them once and then I'm like, it's just I don't really buy it. I don't think I believe in bouldering. Actually, I think it seems like maybe a made up thing. Whereas, I've always been, by virtue of the perfectionism lens, I've always tended towards things that I could be good at. But with comedy, I think I was aware that I wasn't like anywhere near what I wanted to be, but I was so excited to be. I was like, how do I get to a place where I am good at this? I know that I'm not scared of standing up there, and I love the feeling of the little laughs I'm getting. How do I get this to be a job? So I think
that's really cool. And I love you mentioned it before, delusion. I call it positive delusion, because if everyone knew what you knew about stand-up now, we might not actually want to do stand-up. So a bit of positive delusional can really help in our favor.
That's true. That is true. I think naivety can be a gift. I think we block ourselves a lot. Like, we self-edit a lot. I think you watch it with new comics. You don't see new comics up there wondering, like, if anybody's done this stuff before or has told this story already. They're just like, jokes. Jokes. It's here's what I have. And the more you do it, the more you're like, but is it original? Is it unique? It's like nothing is. Nothing. There's no. There's your perspective on it is unique, obviously, but there's very rarely a narrative that hasn't been told in some version.
Yeah. And you bring your own
But you,
spin,
yeah,
hopefully. Yeah.
yeah.
And then you mentioned from the failure side that if you're not actually trying, as someone that's been doing it for a while, it could be very easy, as you said, to just say the same jokes to the same crowd, but then you're not growing. And a lot of comedians, even well-established comedians, can hit a point, not all, can hit a point where they're like, you know what, I'm pretty good. I don't need to get better. I'm earning a lot of money. I'm selling shows. But you have I wouldn't say greater, but you have quite a forward-thinking, more holistic view that you want to be the best that you can be. And so in those moments when you're not feeling it or you're like, oh, I don't want to do this, you're still able to come up or try new material. I want to know where that comes from, because that could be really scary when you're an established comedian to try new things where, you might not get a laugh. So is the overall mindset you want to be the best that you can be? Is that what drives you?
Yeah, I really do. And I think I have been catching up. I didn't grow up on a lot of stand-up. So I think a lot of people grew up wanting to be comics, watched a lot of stand-up, and sort of went in with a sense of how good looks like. Whereas I'm still learning, still watching, still really watching a lot of stand-up. And that's why I love coming to Melbourne, actually, because I think there's a more playful freedom here to the stand-up. Maybe because it's slightly less of a there's so many people doing comedy in London that it's borderline like competitive rather than collaborative at gigs. And so that is good. It really drives you. It drives you, but it does stop you playing sometimes because everything has to be the best you've ever been. So you can get a bit rigid. And I think maybe Australians just are kookier and there's like more fun here. But my point being, I like to come here because I feel like I see comedy and go, I didn't know it was allowed to be that. And that's always I hear myself, even as I say it, I didn't know you were allowed to do that. And it's like, there are no rules, Catherine. I must remember there are no rules. It can be whatever I want it to be. And so I think, yes, I want to be the best I can be, but I also want to like not sort of go, well, that's what I am and that's my potential. Like this show that I'm doing this year is not a show I would have thought I'd do. It's quite different to what I usually do. Not like massively. It's not like I'm not clowning or anything. But there's like, it's a different type of show for me. And
awesome.
Yeah, and also like the way I wrote my first two shows, very different to how I wrote my last two shows. And that's exciting. Like, I think if you're not, I just get bored as well. I think it's partly I'm very easily bored. I think I write a lot of new because the second something's good, I'm like, next. But
Very
I also
rare.
think
Because people want that like really good bit so they can do it on a talk show and keep it for the rest of their lives. And
yeah, but I don't know. I think I'm such a changeable person, and I talk about myself in my stand-up that you got to keep it up to date. But also, I've seen quite a few. I think I understand why you do stop getting better, and I actually think that I will hopefully get to the stage too, where it's actually very difficult to get better, not because you've reached your potential, but because if you have a big enough audience, a loyal enough audience, I think it's hard to tell whether or not something is working, because sometimes they love you. They're so, like, I've noticed even just like having a bigger audience from the podcast or from doing TV stuff, it's so great, but there is a buy-in in the room, which is important and gorgeous and lovely. But I try to work in progress. We do like what we call work in progress shows. You call them trial shows here, I think. Outside of London, far away maybe from places that I would usually gig. Just like cold room, clean slate. What actually do these people think of my jokes? But I think that's increasingly harder the more famous you are. So I feel like now is the time to get as good as you can possibly get, because you will hit a ceiling at some point when everyone's like, everything they do is amazing. And then suddenly you'll have nowhere to go with this.
That's such an interesting perspective, because it's so easy when you're doing well, people like you, to just, as we said, coast. So is that something that you want to pursue, is to go to the rooms where people might not know you? Is this something that you're trying, or is it something you're going to do? It's something I do. I always do work in progress shows outside of. It's funny. I just did a 2-week one at Soho Theatre,
And it was amazing. Had a gorgeous time. But the last show I did before it was in a place called Lichfield, which is in beyond Birmingham in the UK. And am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
Great, I ate shit for 70 minutes. I ate shit so hard.
Of the bam.
Jesus Christ, I played to silence, to dead-eyed octogenarians who were like, why, not just like, we don't like this, but like, why are you doing this to us?
That's hilarious.
And it's so interesting. What was interesting about that is I knew in my heart at that point, I was like, I don't think you're right. I think this is good. But that's fine. I think it's important to go places sometimes and be like, sometimes you're like, oh, actually, I was wrong. That bit doesn't work, or this part doesn't work. And sometimes you go and you go, actually, I believe in my show, even if you don't.
Yeah.
And that's useful. But like, I also think playing in Ireland is really useful for me. Sometimes I can't tell if I'm funny or if I just have an accent, and you have to check. And Ireland's a really good place because if they laugh, I know it's funny. And if they don't laugh, I know I'm chancing it. In London, I'm just saying things in a funny way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question or completely lost the thread.
No, I think that's there's so many thoughts. That's really awesome. How do you kind of keep yourself fresh when you're doing the same show? Like you're in Melbourne. I don't know how many shows you're doing. Okay. Go on.
I find that really hard.
Yeah.
I find it really hard. It's very easy to become dead behind the eyes very quickly, especially when you're doing it every single day, back to back, and in the same room. I think you can find yourself out of body quite easily watching yourself do the show going, what the hell? And often, like having done the show for 2 weeks at Soho, you'd be on stage going, have I done this bit already? Or was that yesterday? But the two ways I try to keep it fresh are I try to remind myself whenever I go on stage, before I go on stage, that it might be, even if it's like the 80th time I'm doing the show, it's the people who've come out, it's their time to see the show. It's their only time to see the show.
Nice.
And they've bought a ticket and they've probably paid for a babysitter or, could be anywhere else. I really, really try to be appreciative of that, and that helps.
Cool. And
the other thing is that I'm a real chatty Cathy. Like, I'm not a person who doesn't talk to my audience. And so that in and of itself, keeping that in my mind, who I've spoken to, what I've spoken to them about, making sure there are windows in the show to have play with somebody, means that it keeps it alive for me.
It's a really smart way. And it also can keep you on track as well.
Yeah. But I think it is just a hard one. Like, I don't know how people do stuff where they're touring like 300 dates. Like, I'm doing 80.
Holy moly.
Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, I wonder what I'll be like on the 80th one. I hope I'm not just saying it backwards just to feel alive. Yeah, I don't know how people do it, but I think that for me, the thing is just to remember, like, this is a chance to give somebody their one good night out.
That's a really unique, refreshing, and that's what you want to hear as an audience member, because it could just be, it's a job, but you've got a really refreshing outlook. And I want to also go back to what you said before about when you tried the new rooms and you're like, they might not find it funny, but you know that you're good because you've tested it that many times that. Something I learned when I did improv classes, and yes, I'm comparing improv classes to stand-up.
Go ahead.
I thought my way of looking at stand-up, I'm an idiot, I know this, was the only way. And I looked at very specific, like I watched a lot of sitcoms and I thought this was like what comedy was. Being thrown in a mix with completely different people to me, I was like, wow, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that, or that's so unique. I might not necessarily find that funny, but that is such a unique way of approaching comedy. And it expanded my view. And it taught me so many things within that, but it also showed me like there's not one way to be funny. And some people might find you funny and others might not. And it doesn't mean like you're not funny. It just means everyone's got different tastes. So it sounds like you did that nod of knowing. It sounds like you've kind of figured that out in your wisdom.
I do think it's so funny when people say like it means anything. I don't think she's funny. That girl's not funny. You're like, it's the most subjective art form, if you want to call it an art form.
Yeah.
That's like wild to me. Imagine being like, I don't like the Rolling Stones, so they're bad at music. It's like, you can be like, I don't like the Rolling Stones, but that's it. Like, they're objectively good at music. See sales. You know what I mean? Like, see the fact that they can do what they do. You're just like, yeah, that's fine. You can be like, that's not for me. That makes so much sense. I can't think of one single comic, of any comic, that everyone likes. Yeah. And I don't want to watch that comic. What a snooze. That'd be so boring.
Yeah.
Who wants the Coldplay of comedy? Shout out to Coldplay. But like, that is like one of the worst things you could possibly do. I can't fathom anyone being so sure that because they don't like my comedy, that means I'm not a comic, not funny, or that I have to care. Maybe that's too like defensive. I just feel like whatever. Like, it's obviously subjective, man.
This is where I learned this lesson, not just from improv, is that when I love Curb Your Enthusiasm, and most people I know don't like Curb Your Enthusiasm, and they're like, it's not funny, it's too cringe, it's what. I'm like, it's a very funny show. From a screenwriting perspective, let's just say no one knew who Larry David was and you showed him a pilot or something. I reckon so many networks would have said, not interested, it's too this or that. Yep. He's found the right environment for him to thrive. And to me, that goes with stand-up. Most people actually in the world, if you showed them Curb, might not find it funny. But they've got a large enough audience to see this is brilliant and the best thing ever. And it actually has changed my perspective, especially with screenwriting, because, and I say this with hopefully as little arrogance as possible, I won a writing award for one of my screenplays, but thank you. But I also didn't get through in other competitions, and other people weren't interested. I had an agent who liked, I did a spec script for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who loved it, but didn't like my like sci-fi comedy, dark comedy stuff. And I'm like, well, that's not the right person for me. Even though they like that, if they don't like the other 6 things that I've written, it's not for me. And so that has taken me, I feel like, a lifetime to get to, but it feels like you kind of figure that out pretty quickly. Am I hearing that right?
Oh, no, I think it's taken me a considerable amount of time to feel that way. But I think it's by watching so much comedy. When you're on mixed bills with people, you can be like, that person's not funny. But you can't go out and watch them kill, like rip the roof off a room, even if you don't love the comedy, and go, well, objectively, they're bad at their job. You're like, especially when you've had to follow those people, or you haven't ripped the roof off that room, and you go, It feels like the consensus is not. So I just think it's really, and also like there are people I love, as you say, similar to that, where like people are like, huh, really? And I think that's awesome. I think it's so fun to be in a room, especially like at Edinburgh Fringe. I find it so funny to be in a room where some people are losing their minds and laughing, and other people are like, I don't get it. What's happening? Why is this happening? That's amazing and kind of the point, isn't it? Like,
I like your excitement of how you see it, because you would have seen plenty, and we don't need to get into it, plenty of comedians that you don't like, whether it's belief systems or their style of comedy sucks. But for you to still, and I'm sure you're human in the moment, you're like, oh, they said this, they're this type of person. But for you to appreciate that they've got laughters, that regardless of what they're saying, they're still funny. I actually think that takes a lot of maturity, because you alluded to this before, but starting up in stand-up or acting, jealousy is prevalent, and we love to compare ourselves. And I feel like that's a massive journey, because there are, as you said, in UK, for example, a little bit of spots. Not everyone can get the big gig. And so I feel like you've come through a massive journey from there to now. Is that correct?
Yes. And I think it's a couple of things. I think I was so relieved when I found stand-up. Like, I really was a bit lost, kind of flitting between things. When it became my job, I think I still feel so unbelievably grateful that I found this thing I like, this thing I'm good at, and this thing that is my job that I love doing. Like, I didn't know if I'd ever find that, and I feel quite grateful. So while I do, of course I'm human, of course I like envy other people, I still feel quite thrilled to be here, and that's an exciting way to feel at work. Like, also, ages ago, a therapist said to me a really helpful thing, and I'm far be it for me to say therapy works, but I found something really helpful really early on in stand-up,
Oh, nice.
which is like, we're very judgmental of ourselves around jealousy, really judgmental of ourselves. We're like, envy and jealousy are bad and unnatural, and you're a failing person if you can't like be like, wow, I'm so thrilled for everyone. But actually, it can be both. It's normal, and it's so like it's obviously like a natural thing.
Yeah.
But it's also really helpful, and that was like, excuse me, because I'm not particularly attuned with my feelings.
I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, I've done a lot of work on it, but I tend to want everything to be okay. So I'll be like, everything's grand. Sure, my problems aren't real problems, and therefore I find it hard to tune into them. But envy is really strong as an emotion, and that means it's quite helpful, because for me, what it often means is that if I feel jealous now, what I tend to do about work stuff, what I'll tend to do is say, huh, that's usually a clue that I want something.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
What do I want? And then, so interesting, if I actually give myself permission, if I'm not like, oh, you're such a, like, you're crap for not getting that, or you're a dick for being jealous, if I actually just go, all right, hang on a second, let's have a word with myself. What is the thing, whether it's like live at the Apollo or advertising a sex toy on Instagram or whatever our job turns out it is now, it's like all kinds of these things all over the shop. Or like being a guest on a podcast about Formula One. Like, it's so many things, this job. But
Hilarious.
do I actually want the thing? Or do I want to be more visible online? Do I want praise? Do I want that specific job? Do I want to know what kind of comic I am? Like, what is it I'm jealous of about the thing? And sometimes it is like, yeah, I straight up want that job. And now, instead of being like, you silly bitch for being jealous, I just send an email to my agent that's like, hey, seems like they're booking for this. Any chance I could do it next time? And then I can like free myself of that. Or
Cool.
what happens most often, this is a pathetic thing, because I think we're so bombarded with visuals of other people's jobs
Yeah.
in online.
Just bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, so we just like decide we must want it because they're saying it's important. But interestingly, when I ask myself if I actually want it, instead of going, you're a dick for being jealous, so much of the time the answer is no. Like, I'll be like, oh, instead of being like, oh, they got another thing, if you're just like, oh, cool, this specific one thing, do I want it? Would I be good at it? Would it make me happy? A lot of the time the answer is no. And that's so much more useful to me than going, you're a child who came for being jealous.
It's very important, and I feel like you would know this as well, how like shame can really impact us and like throw us in different directions. And to have that, first of all, that's very self-aware, and you're obviously aware of your emotions, whether you like it or not. I'm telling you. I also do like a similar approach where, for example, a lot of my friends in corporate, and they're all going to have nice houses and the car and blah, 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 blah. And there's jealousy that springs for me. And it's not, I'm not happy that they don't have it. I'm like, fuck, I would love the nice house and the car. But then when I actually dive into it, do I want to be doing what they're doing? And there's no judgment towards them. No, I'd much rather be where I want to be. And then you play these little games. And as you said, like more times than not, you don't actually want it. You like the idea of it, or you want this aspect. How I do it, don't do it all the time, is I use it as like a way to like pivot. Do I actually want this? Do I like the idea of this? Where am I going to go? And so it actually helps me change my goals and mentally go, you know what, I actually should focus more this way. And it's such a helpful way for me, helpful way of like seeing things. And I think it's really good advice and further to that you've been able to apply, because we all have this so many times in the day, whether we're aware of it or not. And I feel like that would give like breathing space and less judgment to yourself and 10 other emotions. So I think that's yeah, go on.
I've also just, as you're saying it, I completely agree. I also feel like often seeing other people's stuff, while it does invoke jealousy, can also sometimes be like really positivity in engendering, because sometimes it's really easy to think that certain things are not possible. And when you see things be done, like that is actually really good to be like, oh, so it is possible. And that thing of pivoting of like, okay, maybe I'm 5 years off it, but at least it's doable. At least it's being done. At least it's possible. So how do I get there? I love seeing things be like, it's funny, like
Shifts your
I like
reality.
seeing, yeah, it's just nice to be like, okay, cool. People 4 years ahead of me are getting Netflix specials. That's cool. I didn't know I could shoot for that. Now I do.
You know what springs to mind, and I had a lot of shame. I spoke about this years ago, but one of my friends, and I don't care about the numbers. I don't think that's the best way of looking at it. But for him, it's really. I'll say this because he's done a lot of work and it's great. I think he's got like 2 million followers on TikTok, 1 million on
Whoa.
YouTube, and he's a great guy. I was really jealous, and I didn't quite have the self awareness many years ago. His name's Darren Levy, one of my best friends, funny Uber rides. People can check it out, and he showed me a path of what was possible because we both were in similar communities. I think he dropped out of commerce, so one of the best unis, and he went on his own path.
Yeah.
He's been on the podcast as well. And he's ahead of me if I want to look at it that way. But now, because of what we've just spoken about, I'm so happy for him. But he's also shown me a way of what's possible. For example, hopefully I can talk about this. Not a big deal, but he was offered a role, a very small role in like an acting opportunity because people knew who he was and they know his personality and they invited him. Like, that's so cool. I would love that. Whereas if I
Hmm.
didn't quite have the awareness of what we're talking about, maybe I wouldn't be able to enjoy the success. But he showed me indirectly, and we've spoken about this before, of what is possible, what success can look like. Because I thought it had to be a certain way. And I think it is a brilliant way of looking at it. I never quite put it to words. So I appreciate you because you realize that your reality is everyone's reality is really small, and you can see people whether you like them or not. Like, this is a possibility. I can achieve that. Then it expands your worldview and expands how you can work and approach things.
And also, like, just as you said, I'm glad that you agree. Just on people who have like 2 million followers or lots of Instagram followers, I feel like a lot of the time we sort of look at it as quite a shallow thing. I just feel like it takes so much work. I've been quite jealous about those numbers as well because obviously they like lead to
I'd
ticket
love
sales.
them as
But what,
well.
yeah, of course. But what I realized is like I don't know that I'm willing to be on my phone that much. I don't know that I am willing to learn those skills. I find them boring. Like as in like I don't want to. I if I wanted to learn to edit videos, I feel like I would have done it by now. I should learn. I will learn. I must learn. But my point is like it's so much work, and I think people are really glib about it. But it's like no one gets to those numbers rarely nowadays without immense commitment and consistency and work and a skill set that you have to acquire. And I do think it's like
I
admirable.
agree.
But I can both be like, wow, I'd love that. And there's another question is like, but am I willing to do the things that it would take? No.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm the
I'd
same.
love to look like a supermodel. Am I willing to even so much as skip a meal? No.
And
No.
I think that's a great question to ask. Like, if you want it, are you willing to put in the work? No? Okay, then kind of move on. And I don't say to
And how much do
reduce.
you really want it?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and
And
that's
if,
fine.
yeah, like I don't want to. So, for example, Darren, who actually, and I'm not just saying this because we're good friends, he is so phenomenal of fan engagement and his content, and he's actually like a legit pro. And I'd love those skills. I don't want to do them, and I applaud him. And the reason I don't reduce like numbers in general, I'm just saying it's not him and everyone else. It's not all about the numbers. It's credit to him that he's got those numbers. He is so much
Yeah,
bigger. That's why I say, just for clarity, in case anyone was
of course.
confused. But a very, very important question. Like, oh, I look at the person in the gym. Do you want to have like the six pack and all that? Yes, but do I want to do training twice a day? Go on steroids? Absolutely no chance. I feel like that also is very important because yeah, I just feel like this is the industry. You talked about Instagram. It's so easy to compare. Just ask the question, am I willing to do it? I feel like that would also be a guiding light for you, just to check in every now and then and go, am I actually able or willing to do this?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And like, I've been shocked by the things I have been willing to do. Like, I travel so much. I miss
Nice.
a lot of social engagements. You know, I work most days, and that is like an indication, I think, of how much I love comedy. But I clearly don't love athleticism. in the same way. And that's okay.
That's a great point. I think it would be helpful because to go back to how you started, we talked about acting, but how you got into, you were doing debating before that. And I think at one stage you were maybe rated number 2 in Europe. Is that correct?
Number 1 in Europe, but number
Ooh.
2 in the world. Oh, well, technically number 3 in the world because there was a joint first, but that's fine. Yes, I was such a nerd.
That's cool.
I mean, I absolutely loved debating, university debating and school debating. Like, really just, I adored it. I feel like I think it's on reflection, I'm like, there are issues with a bunch of white university kids going into a room and parroting arguments that each other they repeat on binaries that are in and of themselves, like, often the answer is nuanced. But for me, for that kid who like lived in the suburbs and didn't necessarily have like a huge, like, I didn't travel loads as a kid, or I mean, I had like the library and that was amazing. Like, I think that opened the world to me a lot. But I think having to engage with things I'd never have thought about and hadn't thought about, and really, like, debating was, I got to see the world and I got to hear about things and learn about things and find out about things that I would not have engaged with otherwise. So to that end, I think it was really great. But in terms of comedy, it definitely gave me conviction that I deserve to speak for any length of time in public, which I think is a hard-won battle for women a lot of the time, that you belong in public spheres speaking, and that you're entitled to do so, and that you can take up that space, and that you have the capacity to do so, and that your voice is as authoritative and clear as anybody else's. And also, it got me like comfortable in front of audiences and comfortable having an opinion.
I feel like there's so many words that spring to mind, but how brilliant is that to just kind of like, you found something that you're really good at and to realize that you are a worthy person and that all of these, I'm not sure what the word is, potential belief systems that float around the world are not inaccurate or wrong, and that you can thrive in an environment where you are using your brain and mind and charisma to win arguments. I find that so interesting. How, we could speak about this for ages. How did you discover it?
I wasn't a sporty kid. I wasn't a drama kid. I just didn't really have a thing in school except that I was incredibly academic, and I was like very keen to be good at that, and debating somehow fell into my what I've allowed in my very rule-based child mind of like still being academic. But actually it was performance, but I thought it was academic. And so I started it, and I like the absolute base answer is that I had a couple of debates early on where there was maybe like 10 girls in the audience, but I get laughs. And that was enough for me to be like, oh, this is power. I have power. I can make people laugh. This is such an adrenaline rush. This is so exciting. So yeah, I think that's, and also like I didn't feel quite like I fit where I grew up. No one ever does. No, it's so funny that we have some sort of fallacy that we are like the one black sheep. It's like a whole bunch of people being like, am I right? And everyone else being like, I don't know. I think we're all just going to wear the same clothes and hope for the best. And, but I was queer and I didn't quite have words for that yet. And I was really not sure about religion and I didn't have words for that yet. And I felt gobby and, I just felt like out of place, and it gave me a lot of space.
I love it when people find their thing and they're able to explore themselves. And I also feel within, like with stand up or writing, you get to explore aspects of yourself, but debating, you get to say it out loud so you can hear it, as well as stand up as well. One step further is that you need to know both sides of the argument. So it means you can explore the best and worst within yourself in like a safe environment. So I feel like along with your academic ability, it would have really helped your worldview or you getting to know you. Like you said, you weren't that in touch with your emotions, but to me, that's like journaling. That's like meditating. It's you getting to know what works for you and not. Was that, yeah.
And also, I think it enhanced my empathy. I think we have this sense that we can't possibly understand other people's worldviews. And obviously, we can never experience them. I don't for a second mean to insinuate that we can, but I think that like academic curiosity breeds empathy when it is like really curiosity and not coming in with a motive. And I think I had a lot of that when I was a kid. And I think, yeah, being able to explore other sides of things meant that I was like, it didn't necessarily mean I ever changed my mind. A lot of the time you don't. But I think it gives you a capacity to understand that people coming from the other side might not just be bad people. They might not just be ignorant people. They might just have settled somewhere else on the line of reason to you, or of like what's acceptable to them. And I also think for me, I have really never had any shame around being queer. And I wonder if probably that was because before I knew I was, I'd argued for myself. I'd advocated for myself.
As in through the...
As in like I'd argued for gay rights, in debates, and I'd argued for the right for adoption or the right for marriage and things which weren't legal in the country that I grew up in.
Have you done the other way around?
Before I sort of figured out I was gay.
Oh, that's really interesting because you would have done so many different topics that these things were allowed to bring to light.
Yeah.
Have you done any topics where you were like, oh, like Nazis are good, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a hard one? Because then I assume, based on what you said before in the research, there would be a people-pleasing element. And you're like, I don't want people to think that I think this, but I have to win. So that to me, that would be...
And on reflection, the things that we were made to debate, like, were repugnant, some of the things. Like, it's okay to be like, I was saying to a group of comics yesterday, actually, that the like, debate du jour, the sort of, like, intellectual experiment at the time when I was in university was whether or not conversion therapy should be allowed, or, like, whether or not gay people should be allowed to opt into conversion therapy. And so you just have to debate that, like, people should be able to cure you of being yourself.
No shock therapy.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, wow, that's not, like, I don't know that is valuable to just, like, is that really that useful as a practice to, like, explore those ideas, or is that just deeply debasing and demeaning for some of the people in the room and kind of horrid for everyone else?
Yes, I'm sure you would have had quite a few of those. What I really like what you said before is that, how did you phrase it? That although you might not necessarily change your opinion, you're at least thinking about the other side, which gives empathy to the other side. And in this world, we're not going to get into politics, but every single issue we can go, if you're this, then you're that. And it's, I do it, we all do it. And to, as you said, to kind of like put yourself in someone else's shoes is to just, even if you're giving a little bit of empathy, it makes you realize that they're just going about changing the world in a different way to me. And more times than not, they're coming from love. They just have a different worldview and different belief system. Where I always go is that I try not to, but I do, judge someone if they haven't had the experiences that I've had or learnt what I've had. Very hard, doesn't always work. But most people, especially all the ones I know, we might have incredibly different beliefs, and I might be the weird or the whatever, but we're all trying to make the world a better place in our own way. We're not trying to bring harm or anger or whatever to the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really important because it would come through. It doesn't happen all the time. We're all human. We want to call someone this or this. And I feel, I've spoken about this a lot on the podcast, I genuinely feel that's how we kind of change the world. Even if everyone does it 5% more, it gives more empathy to the world, and as lame as it sounds, more love, and we're able to kind of rise above some of these preconceived ideas or better ways of solutions. Yeah, that's my tangent for a better world. I'm glad I'm glad I got your approval. Also on the debating side, I feel like when you're like going over a topic, it would teach you to keep on talking as well, because sometimes with stand-up, you might feel flustered, forget your bit, or no one's laughing and you can just kind of freeze. So I would imagine that that's kind of helped you just to move forward regardless how big a gig is. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I think it's if anything, encouraged me too greatly to keep talking without expertise. But yeah, definitely is like engendered a sort of free capacity. Like I definitely like am quite improvisational. I'm very able to deal with what happens in the room, and that is no doubt based on that sort of comfort.
Nice. You mentioned at the start of the podcast that you're glad that acting didn't happen right away. And I think that's really interesting because the first time when you were recording for TV, they cut your bit. And you mentioned that you were actually relieved and obviously upset. So I'd love to know, can you like paint the picture for me?
The first stand-up set that I got booked for on television, I was so new, like so new. And I did an audition and got this 5-minute set on television. And I didn't know that they booked more comics than they needed. So that if anybody bombed this guy, they would, they just cut. And you get paid regardless. But I remember my agent calling, and I just hate letting anybody down. I really wasn't comfortable with failure. I really thought it was the end of my career. Like, I really thought like everyone would know and it would be the end of the world. And actually, they were taking a punt on a very new comic, and it's good that they did that. And that's what more TV companies should do. I think maybe they should say like, hey, we're going to give you this spot. It might go out and it might not go out. But no big deal, because we're like specifically putting it in for you to give it a whack. But I think at the time, of course, my ego, and I told my friends I was going to be on it. You know, there were so many reasons why it was so painful to be told that I wasn't going to be on the show. But on reflection, I'm like, thank goodness. Like, I got over that. I've been booked for many things since. It wasn't even kind of the end of my career. Of course, you're allowed to get better at things. But had it gone out, that would just exist forever. That would be on the internet. That would exist forever. And there's enough of things on the internet of me where I'm like, good Lord, we don't need another one. So it's great.
What springs to mind is ages ago, I somehow got a meeting with a lady that has all the Netflix connections. She's a big comedy producer here. And I showed her my first script. My first ever script. Didn't have any writing classes. I wasn't looking at any videos. I hadn't discussed with anyone. I shudder to think about it. Yeah. It was actually really good. I had that experience, as I'm sure it was for you. It would have taught you a lot. Yeah. And I thought I'd just get a TV show. And let's just say for some reason she greenlit it, which there's 100 variables to greenlit it. That would have potentially have ruined my career because it was so bad. There was no story. It was just like jokes, and that's not how you do. Anyway, I'm so grateful I got the meeting. She was very polite about it. Yeah. Luckily, I had that because I could have, one, didn't need to take the meeting. Two, she could have said the shittest thing ever. And who knows, I may have not written again. But it gave me experience. I learned so much in that meeting of what kind of works and what doesn't work, more so from what doesn't work. So I feel like, although in the moment you told everyone that you're going to be on this show, you're probably like waiting for the screening, maybe you're with friends and family and nothing happens, the ego goes. But now with hindsight, you realize, as you said, it hasn't impacted your career and you're actually quite grateful for it. We're not putting it out there that all of our stuff is not going to make it out of fear. We're just saying sometimes, for me, like everyone's got different beliefs. Sometimes like the universe can protect us from ourselves. I
agree. And you know what else? I learned some really practical things. Like, you don't have to tell anybody until you know it's coming out. Like, you know, now with acting jobs, for example, I will say it when it's on the television that night. I'll be like, tonight I'm on the BBC. But you don't have to, like, you can book a job and then be cancelled from the job before you even get to set. Like, and that's those things you learn along the way. And it's okay to keep some cards close to your chest until it's done, until it's in the can, I never really believe I have an acting job until they're literally saying action and holding the camera. That kind of thing actually protects you, I think, from disappointment, and also protects you from spending money that you haven't earned yet. Oh boy, that's a good lesson to learn. But amazing. I think additionally, it sort of keeps you grounded for, like, I don't know, I think it has probably informed how I behave even when I do get the big jobs. Like, I think I'm a bit like, yes, and next week, because that's the other thing about comedy, is it's a famine or a feast. Like, you're either booked on everything this month, like you're so busy that your eyeballs hurt, or you're like checking, I'm like getting my girlfriend to call my phone in case I'm like, maybe my phone's not working. Could you call my phone? So it's like, those are the two states. It's me being like, I think the Wi-Fi's down, and everyone else being like, no, I've got jobs in today. Or you're being like, how does anyone do this? And so I think remembering in the moments of success that there will be dips and that there will be another moment along any moment now to keep you humble. means like I'm more present and enjoy the good time. Well, theoretically, I do find them quite stressful, but also maybe makes me not like think that's it, I'm done, I've like escaped some plane of normality and now I'm one of the important people. I'm just like, I'll be back to my usual life in a second.
I think it's really important because, actors, for example, they can have this big job. They're on Star Wars or whatever, but then they're not acting for the rest of the year or might not get a gig for 2 years. But everyone's like, wow, you're in Star Wars, which is amazing. And it's just such a great accomplishment. And then, bam, nothing. And the dips is really important to state because every single person in the creative arts can be like super busy, then no work for nothing. And it's just about like mentally being able to balance it, which
totally. And you can get a job, film it, make more money than you've ever made, then it doesn't come out for 3 years.
Exactly.
So when it comes out, people are like, whoa, you're doing amazing. And you're like, I've been barely living off that check for the last 3 years. And then you get more work because it's come out. But you have to wait. Like, it's so stressful. I couldn't be. I'm actually so glad I'm not just an actor because I would find it so stressful. I think they're so impressive. You have to have a real sense of yourself, I think, and your worth. And I'm not that. I don't have that level of conviction in myself.
Well,
I need constant praise of a gig every night.
We'll agree
I need the little steel cap.
Why don't you just like record people clapping? So like if you're ever having a bad day, like, okay, and put it on the DVD. I think that
it's not the same. It's not the same. Michael, it's not the same. It's like I know when they don't mean it.
You can like tell, like, am I good? It's like, yeah, it's like I
know
know
they're faking, yeah.
Before we do a rapid fire segment, so you're obviously in Melbourne. This will be out in a week and a bit. So your shows are probably already running. Tell us a bit about your show. And you mentioned your last 2 shows that they're different to your original first 2 shows. So I'd love to know about that.
Yeah. This show is called Again with Feelings, mainly because I find myself having so many of the same fraught worries and doubts as I did in my 20s, mid-30s, 35. I thought I'd have it all sorted out and figured out. And it's so interesting to find yourself perpetually both learning the same lessons more than once and also sort of perpetually lost. And I think it's a really funny exploration of that and where I'm at now with a sort of like the ticking of the like biological clock in the background. And I mean, I say that it's like it's a joke. It's a show of jokes. It's a show of jokes, but it's also about how, why, if one can have, how to make family as a queer person, how to become an adult when you are, if anyone is. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it, a lot of fun. And I've stopped worrying about being the type of comic I am in. That's an Irish phrase, I am and that I'm not. And have just started in like being like, I think that's what I feel about the different about the show is I feel like I've accepted I'm a fast talking mad woman who overshares, and that's what people like about her. And so I feel like more myself on stage than ever before, which is really nice.
Congratulations finding that. Thanks. And even like, as I'm sure, if you're an actor and you go in and you're like, I need this role, I need it, you can sense it. And you can also like as a stand-up sense it, but you going in as you is beautiful to see from an audience perspective. Also just live, congratulations. That's a great skill. I'm very proud and happy for you. But they're just, because also when you see like a stand-up get up on stage and you can sense they're really nervous, and it's not a judgment. For me, I'm like, I want to help them. Like you can't enjoy it. And so for you to go up on stage as you, that is really important for the audience to know, because then they can just kind of like, it's safe. Like you're going to go out, you're going to be comfortable. It's you. We're not, yeah.
Dara O'Brien always talks about the first few jokes being your trust me, I'm a comedian jokes.
Yeah.
And that is, you're trying to go, trust me, I do this. Like, it's fine. This is my job. Everything's going to be okay. I've got this. You don't even have to do anything. You can just relax and enjoy the show. And I think, I feel I'm in my trust me, I'm a comedian era.
I'm very happy to hear that. It takes a while to get to, and a lot of
it sure does.
a lot of challenges and big journey there. That'll be in the episode notes below, so people in Melbourne, they can check it out.
Oh my gosh, please come. Sorry, I'm my authentic self, but I'm also desperate that people come to the show. So please, my goodness me, please buy tickets. I'd absolutely love to see you. I'm at the Westin, which seems like a fiercely posh hotel, and I'd absolutely love to have you in, please.
We will upload that before the podcast is out. I think that's a great promo for your show.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, we'll do a really quick rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, ready to rumble.
Please.
Do you have a philosophy on life that you follow?
Huh? No, God, I wish I did. Imagine. Ha! No. Yikes. Every morning I'm shocked to find out how I feel. No.
Never had that. That's great. I won't comment on them because I'll derail them, but that was great. What brings the best creative content out of you?
Trauma. Same with everyone.
Actually, on that, we haven't spoken about it, which we'll have to do a part 2 sometime in the future. What has helped with your mental health over the years?
Medicine, a good doctor, therapy, exercise, fresh air, good friends, patience, a little bit of self-acceptance, some interesting YouTube videos, and more medicine. A lot to be said for modern medicine.
And the YouTube videos, I'm very intrigued about that.
Oh, occasionally I think that I'm having a breakdown, and sometimes I just need like a cartoon visual of, just to explain to me that like I might just be hungry. And other times, yoga with Adrian actually does change my entire day. Sorry, I don't know if you're listening to this and not watching this online, in which case you might not know or may not have known until just now. I'm obviously a white woman. Yes.
Yoga with Adrian. I'm going to check it out. What is your biggest pet peeve?
People being rude to, it's really boring, but people being rude to retail staff. It's like, or like rude when you have the power. I just think like, just be nice. I've had so many crap retail jobs, and I think watching people be sort of livid about something that clearly isn't the teenager's fault makes my blood boil.
Yeah, it's like when you see like a waiter and they're like, the chicken's not cooked, for example, and then the waiter gets abused. Also, the chef didn't do it on purpose. I never understood that, and abusing the person. Yep, I like how you're like, it's not funny. It doesn't need to be funny I know what you're saying though.
Yeah.
We're on the same page. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm a pretty resilient gal. I think I've built up a lot of resilience. I think I'm proud that I'm still trucking along.
Very nice. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Try to dance sexily.
Try to dance sexily, is that what you said?
Yeah.
What is that?
I think it's the most, I mean, like try to give like a partner like a lap dance. That's
gotcha.
like, like try to dance and be sexy at the same time. That's not something I'll ever do in my lifetime, because the idea of doing that badly is so mortifying to me that I'm red forehead to nipple as we speak. But if I could be like, yeah, she's going to love this, then yeah, I'd give that a go.
I also wish I had that. I feel like there's a very like small window of absolute cringe to like genuine like sexy. For me, I think I've got like 0 to like 99.9. So I wouldn't like, that's the one thing where I'm happy to be like, I'm not going to try that. I know my range, but I'm glad that you're going to try and pursue it. Good on you.
Oh, well, I would if I knew I couldn't fail, but I don't know that, so I won't.
Well, you can put it out to the universe in your own way. Next big dream or goal?
I would love more people to see me do stand-up. In whatever form that takes, I would like to be able to talk to a bigger audience, for sure.
Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
You don't have to invite your friends. That's my advice. There's some sort of insinuation or belief that you have to bring like a buddy or a family member. You can go a town over by yourself and give it a whirl. You don't even have to tell them you did it.
Great advice. I wish I did that. Before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, pardon me, what is the one question I should have asked you?
You know something, and I'm not just saying this has been such a relief of a podcast. When somebody says you're going to talk to a man, if I may, a man, for 80 minutes about comedy, I go, oh God, okay, here we go. Oh, it's basically stuff you found about me on the internet, is it? All right, lovely. Okay, grand, yeah. I get tense. And this whole time I've been like, these are really lovely, well-considered questions. So no, I think you did a real good job, pal.
You have made my day. I appreciate it. Very kind of you. And
Oh, actually, the only thing I can think of is if we're trying to get the lesbians in to see my show, and I always am, you could have asked me my start time. It's a Leo. Thank
a
you.
Leo. And
Yeah.
is this a very popular thing amongst the lesbian community, Leos?
Yeah, we're no, but astrology.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I'm learning a lot. Every day I'm learning something new.
Yeah, listen, life's a constant learning process, and I'm glad I could let you in on that.
Thank you. When I've introduced you, should I say that Catherine is a Leo and she's also an actor, a stand-up, and
yeah, you probably just leave it at Leo. The lesbians will know what's up. Yeah.
Amazing. Before we go, how can people follow you? And we know that you've got your shows out, but just to follow you, like on socials.
I'm on Instagram and TikTok and the formerly known Twitter at Catherine Bohart. So it's Catherine with a C and Bohart. And I mean, I'm in the Melbourne Comedy Festival brochure. I'm on their website. Come see a show. I'd love that.
Amazing. That will all be in the episode notes below, so people can check it out below, I assume, if you're on your phone. Amazing. I love your positivity. You've got a very forward-thinking mindset, and this has been really light and amazing, so thank you so much.
A real treat. Thanks for having me.
I love how Catherine talks about pushing ourselves to achieve greater results. Often in life, when we achieve some form of success, we want to maintain it, and sometimes come from a lack of abundance mindset, in that we don't strive to be better. Catherine encourages us to think and live bigger, to get better at one's craft and not be afraid to attempt new projects, regardless of whether we're good at it or not. This is a wonderful way to push ahead, grow, and overall become better at what we want. By doing so, our picture of what can be achieved improves, and more likely, success will follow. She reminds us that sometimes failure is really needed for us to succeed and to evaluate whether we're on the right track, or even great question to ask ourselves of what needs to be changed. As Catherine says, if you're not bombing, you're not pushing yourself. Also, Catherine gives a great example when she talks about the Rolling Stones. Not everyone will like your stuff, and that's okay. Sometimes you haven't found your audience. Focus on the ones who enjoy your work. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. You owe it to yourself to become everything you dreamed of being. Anonymous. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.